I met Anthony when I was in high school, and that was in 1969.
How'd you meet?
I broke my leg 3 times in 1 year, and they sent me to Ohio State for physical therapy. I broke it. Once I fell out of a tree. I was trying to catch a chicken, and then Eric and Mark pushed me down a barn shaft wall, and I broke it again. And the last time, I had been taking riding lessons, and I had a 2x4 set on garbage cans, and I was doing jumps with a hunter, and a gelding threw a shoe on the 2x4 and rolled over right on top of me. And it broke my hip into like 3 places, and it fractured part of it, and they had to put a pin in it, and I was put in the hospital. And then I was sent to University Hospital, and I had to have physical therapy, and they were going to sign a physical therapist to me. And how they did it was that in those days, if a person was doing their internship, the person that would do your basics with you, that was the person that was a student, and they would go through performance with you, and you'd have to like have whirlpool for so many hours a day, and then I would have to have walking with, a cane, and it was just different procedural things that I went to, and my oldest brother would take me, drop me off the hospital every day, and then pick me up when he was done with work. And the first day I was there in the hospital, I saw this blonde-haired person with pretty blue eyes coming down the hall, and I thought to myself, I hope this is the person that asked me for therapy. And it turned out to be Anthony. It was the person that I had for therapy. And so I had to go to therapy 3 times a week. And so I did that, and that went on for 6 months. Well, see, then I kept breaking my leg. So I had to do it once, and then had to do it again, and then I was just stuck in therapy. It seemed like I was never out of therapy. It seemed like I spent so much time in the hospital.
The same leg over.
I broke the same leg over. Yeah, that's why. And the doctor said, they weren't even really ever sure if the tendon connecting the muscles would securely heal, because they were real stretched, and when the horse was falling, that stopped. With my horse, I probably had an awful lot of pressure, and there had been a lot of damage on the bones and muscle. And so he was just real good about therapy, and I was still, pretty naive and young then. I hadn't lived in this state very long and didn't have very many friends, and it was hard for me to make friends. And I think he must have known, I was kind of lonely too, and I just didn't take everybody then. I was a lot quieter, but if you could get me to talk, then I was fine. I would kind of chat on for a while. And so we saw each other, and we were just friends, and then every once in a while we would do something together. Like, I would be late, or my brother would say, can you stay a little bit longer, maybe like 2 hours or something. He would be done early, and I would think it was so funny. He would come back, and he didn't have to stay there that long. He would talk to me, and he'd be there when my brother came to pick me up, or he'd say, well, now how would you like to go and do something, and I'll take you home, which I thought was real strange. And I know my mom didn't like it. She said something about it a couple of times, and she just thought it was funny. I think that there was an older person that was paying not so much attention to me. And then what I do, I went, I can still remember going to do something with him, and it was something for something at school. And I went with him, and that was one night, and that night I thought, I think this person really likes me an awful lot, more than just a friend. And but I didn't have any conception at all that he was daring like that. And it wasn't really until I graduated from high school, because we never had sex with each other for the first 3 years. That I knew each other all through high school. We did a lot of things with each other, and by then, we had a pretty secure foundation for a relationship. We knew each other very well. You spent a lot of time getting to know the person, and and really liking the person. And when I graduated from high school, he asked me out for dinner. And he was graduating from college then, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, well that would be the end of it, because, you know, I was graduating from high school and he was graduating from college, and I couldn't break my leg another time, you know. I couldn't keep breaking my leg. I broke it 3 times. That was bad enough, and so he told me, you know, that he really liked me. He never said, this is funny, I could never remember until maybe the year before he died ever hearing him say that he was gay. He didn't have that identity in his mind. You know what I mean? People back then didn't. I mean, people didn't. I think people like our parents. They didn't talk about. You never heard people. It wasn't until I went to college. I never heard anybody talk about sex or having sex. You know what I mean? Because we never talked about that at home. We talked about animals having sex, breeding dogs and horses at the table, but we never talked about people having sex. You know what I mean? And so he asked me on a date, and he asked me out to dinner. I went out to dinner with him, and I thought, oh shoot, because I would never be able to see him again. And he told me that he really liked me a lot, and that, you know, he was interested in me, and he wanted to see me, and we still didn't have sex then. You know, it wasn't when we did the first night, bang, boom, anything like that. In fact, I can still remember like it was later on, you know, and doing really silly things like being real naive the first summer that I graduated from high school, and staying overnight at his house, and my mother wondering where I was at, and doing all sorts of funny things like they had a balcony, and going outside and both of us sitting together in the chase lounge, like with him, I would sit between his legs on the balcony in the chase lounge in our pajamas and eat our breakfast cereal in front of all the neighbors in the morning. And it was just like things like that didn't bother you at all. You know what I mean? It never. Yeah, I understood that he was gay. He just had a very much. He wasn't closeted at all. He was just very different in his approach to everything. He was a professional person, and he never ever worried about the fact, like, I can remember walking him across campus when I was in college to tell him goodbye, go to school, and kiss him goodbye on the road. And him never flinching once about that or thinking that anybody inside would see. And it wasn't even until I think that he felt like we had what he considered a marriage that he would sit down and even talk about sex. You know what I mean? He was a very private person about what he considered to be private. And one of the things that, you know, he considered to be private was things about, you know, I didn't have the approach to my life then that I have had, you know, in previous years, was that I was kind of public image. Well, I wasn't a public image then. I was a private person and I had a private life, and people didn't know so much about my private life. And he had the idea that he didn't want people to know so much about me too. You know, we lived in Arlington, but I can still remember him saying to people, don't tell everybody where we live, because they didn't know why we lived there. And he'd say, because it was real easy for me to say to people all the time, you know, well, we live in a 14-year house in Arlington, you know. And I tell people that all the time too. And he'd say, he was just very circumspect about things, and he'd say, I don't think you have to tell everybody that, or I don't think they have to even know. I said something that I kind of already was planning in my mind, that I was going to move out and move in with him. And I didn't know how I was going to do it, because we couldn't live together in the apartment where he was at, because they had a rule that 2 people weren't allowed to live in a 1-bedroom apartment. They had a rule. And in fact, I think there was something about even that at that time. 2 males could not occupy the same bedroom or something. And I said, well, I wouldn't be too surprised if I moved in with you. And my mom thought that was awful crazy. She said, now why would you move in with somebody like that? And I was real subtle, but I tried to be blatant at the same time. I didn't know how to do things like that then, and I didn't actually say where I was sleeping in this person or anything, and I just said, Well, I might want to have a relationship with this person where I'd want to live with them. And my mom was floored. She was flabbergasted. And she said, I can't believe that you would say something like that to me. And I was real close with that, my mom at that time. And I said, if I can't tell somebody like you something like that, who am I going to tell it to? And she was just freaked out completely. I think she was lost.
So you had never told you were gay before that?
No, And I felt like, that I could really, I had kind of confided to my mom about things a long time ago about, I had a crush when I was somebody in high school. It drove so nuts. She said, I made a little shrine out of all their things, and worshipped them and just carried on. And my mom, this is embarrassing. It's got to stop. Your father's having a fit. Your brothers make fun of you, and it's very noticeable to everybody. My dad's sister had told my dad, that's Nathan's child. That's
well, your father must have known what was going on. You had a brother.
Yeah. They were very afraid. That was one of the things, that they said, why that they stayed married for such a long time, was because of Augie, and that, they weren't really getting along so well. But my mom said that they really thought that they owed it to Eric, and I was trying to set a real good heterosexual example of marriage was. Well, the thing was, we never used it for a role model, We never ever considered it at all.
So then, when did you first go to the bar? How did you know? Have you gone to bars before?
Yeah, I did. I went to the bar, and I ran around before I met Anthony. And I was never 40, though. I mean, not then. I didn't do things like that. I didn't sleep around. I did drag, and I was real screamy and cleany and everything. But I wasn't a hoary person at all. I was real prude about having sex, and I didn't even use any kind of bad language or anything then. Well, I got to consider what my background was.
Did you wear makeup?
Uh-huh.
How did you learn that?
My mom used to dress me up for Halloween every year in drag. And every year she'd do it, and she'd say, I had real pretty eyes, and my mom would say, he makes such a sweet girl. She'd say that to my dad. She said, look at him, Bill. She said, you should have been a girl. He's just too pretty. My dad would get real upset and say, I don't know why you do this every year. And my mom would say, well, he wants to do this every year. I would put on so much cute. But my mom thought it was so lovely. I would just, I'd be in a dress and pearls and everything else. And the bad thing was that for the day before the day after that, I was still like a half drag, running around with makeup on and earrings and stuff and a headscarf. And my dad would go, get that off. Or somebody said, they let me run around the house like that, And my dad had come down. I still remember I was downstairs, and we had the upstairs bathroom. My dad came downstairs, and I was putting on makeup. I sat down on the toilet while I was in the bathroom and looked up, and I was putting on the eyeshadow. My dad goes, what are you doing, Stephen, like that? And I said, I'm getting ready for Halloween tomorrow. I have to practice on my face. And he's supposed to practice somewhere else, something like that. I can still remember calling up Anthony and telling me that too about my dad. He's going, now don't make your father angry, don't make your dad mad, don't get him upset about stuff. Because my parents were just nothing compared to his parents. They were so conservative. His mom and dad.
Where did his parents go?
We never told his dad. He would show that he was an awful man. He was just terrible. And did I ever tell you this story? His dad was never had been in love with his mother, and he'd gone to World War II. He was Italian, moved to this country, and she was Romanian. He fell in love with her and got engaged, and then he went to World War II, and he came back and he wasn't in love with her. So he was engaged to her, so he told her he wasn't in love with her, and it broke her heart. She was never the same, but he said he would marry her anyway, and she married him. Knowing that he didn't love her, but she was still in love with him, and that was all right with her. And he had made a box for her, and I would say this box is real bad luck. But the box that came from her parents and her father in Romania, this box for them, and it had come from this woods in Saxony, blah, blah, blah. And she kept all the letters from him during the war to her in this box. And then when he died, or no, before that, during Vietnam, she gave it to Susan, and Susan kept all of Leo's letters in it. And then when my brother was in Germany, I had the box, was given to me, and I gave it to my brother, and my sister-in-law, Susan, had all of, or not Susan, but who was Mark engaged to Mary, had all of Mark's letters in it. And then Leo had it, and Susan had it during Vietnam, and then Mark had it after Vietnam when he was in Germany. And then I got the box back and had all of Anthony's letters in it right before he died. And then when he died, I said, I think we should get rid of this box. And Susan said no, and she took the box back, and she's got the box. Yeah, I said the box is bad luck. I think it's bad luck.
So, but he did tell his mom.
Yeah. His mom was real good, and she liked me a lot. She was real nice. She was real Catholic. She went to Mass every day. Said novenas for her relatives every Tuesday, and she was so religious. And she always told us, oh, don't tell his father. He'll have a heart attack. He'll die. And his dad was horrible. He was just real mean, you know. He was old man. And he was nice, though. I mean, he could be nice, you know. It was real funny. He died, and it just seemed to wipe his mom out. She was never the same after. He had a heart attack the year that Anthony died. And she was just never the same after that. She was kind of empty, just like something had kind of gone out of her life. And he died of a heart attack. And she was real funny. Now, when Anthony died, she and Susan and I kind of really helped each other, but she wanted to make sure I got all my furniture and stuff like that, you know. It was mine, and she felt like, you know, she belonged to me, and no one would say anything about that. And got my inheritance money. Half of it went to me, and then there was half of it that I didn't spend on me. He had a sister that was retired, and she's in Lutheran Senior Nursing Home, and she's the only Deliano that's alive. She's in Lutheran Senior Nursing Home. And Susan and I took the other half of our money and put it in Lutheran Senior Nursing Home to take care of Ann. And that's where that money went. But Anthony's mother was terrible. She'd come up at Christmas time and stick $20 in my hand and cry and carry on and say, oh, there's nobody to take care of you, you know. She just didn't go over real well with her, you know.
I thought his son was killed then, too.
Vietnam. She had 2 boys and a girl.
So what bar did you first go to when you came to Columbus? You would have been underage, right?
Yeah. I used to go to the Kismet. I'd drive down there and sit in my Plymouth and try and think about going in, and I couldn't.
How did you know where it was?
Let's see. I had a friend in high school. He was gay. His name's Brad Black, and I still see him now. He goes to the bar a lot more now than he ever did then. And he was 2 years older than me, and he was in college. And I'd drive down to, he would stay at his house. My mom would let me stay, and I never had sex with him. They had dirty magazines, like, not advocates, dirty magazines, yeah. And I had never seen pictures of naked men before. And
it was in, what, 1973 or 2?
It was like 1970, yeah.
70.
And I looked at
riots going on.
Yeah, that was about the same time we'd go down there all the time, and it wasn't real dangerous. My mom was kind of worried to have me down at OSU so much of the time. And he lived over on 9th Avenue in this big house with columns, this big overgrown lawn. It was real, like God was with me inside the house. And he lived with this person that was from Pennsylvania. Yeah, it was real strange. And he was an artist, and he had Spider-Man things, Spider-Man dolls, and webs hung up all over his candles, and artwork, and I had never known anybody that was like that. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I was just floored because everybody we knew, but his whole family was so scary. His mom had 50 cats, and she kept them in this big thing that was filled out of cinder blocks and glass doors on it. She'd lock the kittens in and feed them and open it up. Oh, it was so bizarre, yeah.
Well, that's Gahan. So he told you where the Kismet was?
So we went to the Kismet with a group of people.
So you didn't go by yourself?
No, but I could never go by myself. It took me forever. I used to go with Vicki Smith, this girl. I went to straight bars a lot. People can't believe this, but I did. And people think it's new. I was trying to think of something, and I told Daryl, I think the first thing that I ever did where I really started to run around a lot, I belonged to Wagner's Thesis Society when I was a sophomore in high school. Every Sunday we went out for lunch. We'd go to like Jeff's Smorgasbord or Buffet, or we'd drive to Old Man's Cave or Hoover's Dam. We'd use up a whole gallon of gas. We'd split our money. We'd save it all week long. We worked at a burger shop, and we'd save our money, and on weekends we'd divvy it up and give Jeff gas money. We'd drive clear out of the county. We'd go to Hinckley to see the buzzards come back. We just thought it was a big deal. We'd do everything. And that's when I'd eat dinner. We'd go to somewhere to lunch. And they were all either Wagnerians or Royalists or very intellectual young German people. And one friend of ours that they were Lutherans too, and she came from a Hawaiian minor royal family of some prince, and they were Hawaiian aristocracy, and they were Lutherans now. And her father was Hawaiian, and her mother was like Philippine, and she was real pretty, but black boys were always after her. She'd go off, and we'd go out to the boys' academy with a bell jar and a butterfly net and go fag hunting.
Oh, no.
And we'd come down to Mirror Lake with butterfly nets, and that's when gay people cruise those areas. We'd take butterfly nets and scream and run through that area until afterwards. And that would be like late at night, we were supposed to be like, but we would do that on a Sunday. We would go to dinner, we'd go some out in the afternoon, and then we'd have to be downtown to go to the Ohio Theater, or the organ would go on at 7, and then the James Dennis and the organ, and then at 7:30 was the movie. And we were always there for that. And then we would go somewhere afterwards, and it was usually to look for fags. Run around in the car and screaming afterwards. And I'd do the Wicked Witch of the West. I'd melt out the windows while we were screaming along, going up and down Main Street.
You were all high school?
We were still in high school. And that's when I first began to really get kind of wild like that and do things. And I can still remember, and Anthony would say, "You did what?" I'd tell him these stories, things I did and everything, and he'd say, "You did what?" And right afterwards, then, when I graduated from high school, I moved out that summer. I was gone by July. I didn't stay at home for over a month, and Anthony had moved in with me. My friends would all come out to Arlington to come to my house for my church youth group in high school. When I was in college, I belonged to University Lutheran, but I still belonged to the youth group at Bethany, and they would do things with me, and they'd come to my house. My one, Susan, my real sister-in-law, and then Karen, this other friend of mine from church, they were older, and they did a lot of things. They were like the advisors for a church group. And she taught me how to drive, and they'd come over to my house, and she was a little bit older than me, but she was young enough to, relate to kids. And they found dirty magazines. I had gone to Lion's Den and bought 2 dirty magazines. And the first weekend that I had them, Eric found them underneath the couch and showed everybody. And
wonderful youth group meeting.
Really, true. And everybody knew, and no one ever told me that they knew. They were so good about me being gay, and I could never figure it out later. It wasn't until a year later on, and I got them all together, and Rexan, my friends from high school, and we had this big party, and I said, "Well, I want to tell you something." And everybody just hated this party. The whole thing, they didn't want to come to it. Certain people didn't come to it. I got real mad. I didn't know why. And I had told everybody at school, I was going to tell them I was gay, And I got them all together, and they said, "Don't tell us we know what this is all about. You're going to tell us that you're gay. Don't do it. We know." And I said, why? And they said, well, there's just something about you saying it that's just like, they didn't want to hear me say it. They knew it. And my brother said, we found those books a year ago, and I showed everybody, and I was just flabbergasted. I wanted to kill my brother. I just wanted to murder him.
He probably wanted it.
Oh. They said he looked at him the most. He said, what's this man here with his penis in his mouth? That was wild. And they came to a birthday party I had at my house, and I made magic brownies. That was when I first started getting into drugs. I had never really done drugs until I graduated from high school. And I would eat them in things, but I wouldn't smoke dope. You know what I mean? If somebody would make something like that, I would think that was real easy. You could eat it, but it wasn't the same as doing drugs because you were just eating it. I know I had to rationalize, but it was so sick. I'd say, well, you could eat it, but it wasn't really doing drugs. You get terribly high and everything. And everybody at the party was the same way. And in fact, it's real funny because now I work with a woman. That was when Roger Fraze and I first became friends. And Gretchen, who is Renee's lover that I work with now, is her lover. And we ran around with each other then. That was 10 years ago. And here later on, here she has a different lover. And 10 years from now, I'm still running around with her. And it's real long. She told her lover, she said, Vicky and I have been running around with each other since we first started college. We've known each other for 10 years. And they have a dog named Thaddeus, and Thaddeus is just now 10 years old. And I can remember when they got him as a puppy. It's real funny. Oh, when I first went to the Kismet, the music was run by a jukebox.
What's that? I didn't think they had this good around.
No. And, but people danced to that. It was real loud. And you could hear it everywhere, and they played different songs. I mean, it wasn't like you put quarters in it up until a certain time. It would just play music. They would have music selected, and it would be the top 50 hits or whatever. And maybe toward the end of the night, they would play another song twice.
They weren't mixed at all. The record would end, and then you had to
just end, and then it would stop, and then you'd stop, and then you'd dance again. That was always the way that it was. And it's real funny because it was real different. There were tables and old couches with leather seats and regular old couches, just stuck with tables, linoleum tile, a big raised bar. That was the big thing about that bar, was that raised bar.
Where was that?
That was the center. It was an island bar. It was a raised bar. All it was a platform, but they call it a raised bar, and it was very unique and different. You could fall off the raised bar and hurt yourself. It was really deep. And it had a railing around it. Then they put a railing around it so people would fall off there so you could catch on to the railing while you were drunk and hold on. It was not right. And they had drag shows there a lot.
Who was the head queen back then?
When I came out, the queen that was rising, really, I only ever remember one queen before I came out, and that was my Aunt Beatrice. And when she left for New York, she said, I'm taking down my crown and giving it to you. And she said, this city is yours. She told everybody, I'm going to tell Victoria to run things. And when I'm gone, that's who's going to be in charge. And they all said, well, we believe it. We can imagine this would be the person that would do it, too.
Well, how was she your aunt?
She was Mother's sister.
Was she?
Yeah, and they ran around with each other at school. His name's Greg Little, and he was at that party at TA's that one night when I was there and talked to him for a real long time. Oh, yeah, good heavens, my Aunt Beatrice, she's just arrived.
She lives in New York?
She's a voice teacher, and she has students in the Metropolitan Opera, and they do Broadway musicals. She's very famous. She's very, very good. Very good voice teacher.
Well, what was she like during her reign?
Oh, she was very campy and very funny.
She's been older.
She was older. She's in her 30s. She's like a church organist teacher, you know, so a teaching kind of person. She prodded people and brought them along. Very funny and very camp sort of humor. I was a little bit overweight, made fun of her weight a lot. Everybody else made fun of her weight. She loved to eat. And we'd all go to Tiny's then. Oh, that was just a dump. Did you ever go there?
Yeah.
Tiny's and Schnetti's. Oh, my God, what a whole hell.
Where was Tiny's at?
Tiny's was a bar up on, oh gosh, right up by the Southern Hotel. Same block as the Southern Hotel. And Mother worked as a go-go boy there. go-go boy. She'd come over and sit with me when she put on this little terry cloth robe. She'd get done dancing, come over and she'd say, I've got to get up there and do a couple more steps. And she'd get up and bump and grind the music and Terry. We never looked at Mother when she danced. You know what I mean?
Well, that was a big thing how go-go boys, like the Steve Walker from Toledo was a go-go boy out at that other Mr. Frankie's. Did all bars have go-go boys? None of them ever had that when I came.
That was a big deal.
Nobody had that
feature then.
No one really does have that now.
It was an innovative thing. That's what they did. They tried to kiss it a couple of years ago.
This doesn't go over for some reason. I don't know, but in Washington, D.C., that's a big thing. In Washington, D.C., a lot of
They
bars.
probably have pretty nice places.
And in Toronto, they have it too.
Real good.
Yeah.
And Connie's was just a sleaze hall. The food was awful, but it was cheap.
Oh, was it a restaurant?
They stayed up all night long. They were up every night of the week. And on the weekends, I can still remember as far back as that. Gay people went out on the weekends. You know, there weren't things like pancakes. Gay people didn't go to places like that then. Do you know what I mean? Not for an after-bar crowd. It wasn't until lunch started on campus that was just so out of proportion. And then when 161 was then that pancake house out there, you know, when they had that bar out there, but then people went to Schmitty's, and Schmitty's,
Where was that?
that was down on the corner of close to where the Barrett station is, like on Counter State Street, and that was mostly on the weeknights. It was the only place that you could go, and the winter was icy. But there again, that was a place that for some reason, that was just real big. And I'm trying to remember, even after Lums maybe stopped, Schmitty's was real big again, and then that was right before they tore it down.
So a lot of stuff is in that area, those buildings, they all tore down.
Well, that building that stands where Schmitty's is now was that Banning and Pickett, that big building with the mirrors all on it.
Yeah.
But they're just getting done completing the building now. I walk by every day and see all the work in town. But then Lums came, and then that was such a different, it was different. That was really from, 1975, things were never the same after that. Just the gay community had gotten so large. At OSU, there were so many people. And they were all friends with each other. Boy, then that was the last year that happened. That was Miss Thompson's group of people, and Terry Lou, and my daughters that all live in Florida and in the Virginia colony there. And after that it was just never the same. The groups of people didn't harmonize. There was friction between people. I mean, it was different. I can't understand it. I don't know what happened after that. But it seemed like there were always differences, and there were always people that didn't like each other. But you could suffuse the differences in order to get along for some reason. It seemed like just after that point, people didn't care. Do you know what I mean? And there were enough gay people that they didn't have to do that, too. It wasn't any longer a small community. It was really very large then. There were a lot more gay people.
That's probably part of the reason then, as it got bigger and bigger, there was more factionalization going on. Because by the time I came in the group in 78, it was very factionalized. In fact, people would tell me, don't go to Gay Alliance. You know, that is a private group. You have to be asked, invited to go to it. You know, this is one of the campus, but I was going to bars first, and I thought, what is this strange organization that you have to be invited to go to?
Well, I think one of the things that, as far as that goes, and I feel a little bit proud because unlike German village groups or Victorian village groups that moved in and took over areas or whatever and were original neighborhoods, I've always been an original campus person with the exception of the years, you know, that I lived in Arlington, which still that wasn't that far away from campus that you didn't really, I was still considered part of a campus group of university group of people then. Because my husband worked at the university and I was in school, but we were considered local people. Do you know what I mean? I was considered a local Columbus person, part of an original group of gay people that were always, and that people I stayed at too. They could go to the Kismet and people would come looking for me. And Jane, I talked to people this last week and they said, we know if we find you and ask you that you'll know what's going on and where it's at or something about it. And they say, if you don't know, I just don't know. Who wouldn't, Jamie?
Well, so how'd you get to be Beatrice's niece then? Through Richard, or was it?
Well, that was
you
my
must
mother's
have,
sister, but see, she went to the wall all the time, so.
but you must have known her before you knew Richard.
Yeah. Uh-huh. She went to bar. My mother really never was very much of a bar person. My mother went to Tiny's, and Beatrice was a socialite, you know. She ran things. She was in charge.
Well, did she do drag shows then too?
Yeah. She did. She was drag queen.
Well, what was I going to say? Now, when you first came out, did you come out by doing a drag show, or
No.
you didn't do any of that then?
I did it then, but it wasn't right away. It's like I got interested in it real soon, though. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't out very long, and I was going to Fort Wayne doing drag shows.
You went all the way to Fort Wayne.
Well, see, we were going to Fort Wayne all the time anyway to go see family and stuff. So I was in Fort Wayne. So I found a group of people that came clumps from Fort Wayne, and I just started going to Fort Wayne with them and ran around doing stuff.
Yeah. What kind of things would they drag numbers to, though?
My stuff was all like B. Arthur and she already had done bosom buddies before they had ever done it for Maine, for Lucille Ball and I do B. Arthur do the bosom buddies and things like Ethel Merman. I did funny stuff, older women that were comedians, Hermione Gingle and you know that Hermione Gingle and I'm trying to think of the Frenchman's name that was in Gigi. He was a French singer. I just did older ladies' parts that were comedians that, you know. Later on, I had a sister named Boladovia, and she did, I'm trying to remember, Fanny Flagg, and she'd do this Midwestern thing where the bride's mother wore a violet thing, it goes on about all this stuff. And then she'd do this thing where she was at a cash register, and she'd go, "How's your little boy? Ham." And then she'd run up something else. She'd go, "Toilet paper." It was this lady on a cash register reading off a grocery list. It was real bizarre stuff. Do you know what I mean? Oh, real funny thing.
Well, no one does that kind of comedy stuff with drag shows.
No, it's not popular. Huh. There was a whole different approach to drag then. It wasn't. It was considered good taste for drag was to do funny things, or Cocktails for Two by Spike Jones. Have you ever heard Spike Jones albums? And they'll go, "Cocktails for two at two." Then a fire alarm will go off and the thing will zing and go and all these noises. And there'll be a song and they continually go through things like that. Well, they used to do that, Spike Jones Cocktail for Two, and there'd be a drag queen and somebody dressed up as a man in a tuxedo. And when they get to the part where the siren would go off, they'd act like they were drunk. They'd pop up from the chair and spin all around like dance together. And then it would go back to Cocktails for Two. They'd be spinning back down again and everything else. The alarm would go off. They'd get up and dance, just carry on and everything. You know, it was real strange. It was real different. It was considered in bad taste to do serious drag. And the first time that things like that they were always, if they were done and they were serious, they had to be romantic or sensual or sexual. And then it almost had to be like, you were so serious about it, it was like a real heady intellectual thing. And people would go away and they'd say, "What did you think about that? Wow, wasn't that really something special?" So, in this whole group of people, they were going on about the intellectualism of doing a serious drag number that was approached from a realistic point of view, and that this was really a woman, and you were supposed to think of this as a relationship with a woman between a man, not making fun of it that was something that was silly or anything. And at that very point, I said in a larger group of people how stupid, mundane, and thoughtless I thought the whole thing was. And there was nothing intellectual fascinating about the whole thing, and I wouldn't sit through it, and I refused to. And everybody got upset and mad at me. I couldn't see anything behind it at all. I thought, oh, they were a bunch of adults. They were just talking about something they didn't know about at all. I thought it was stupid.
Well, did you ever feel victimized at all? I mean, when you first came out, were there queens that picked on you? I mean, Did you have to sort of have a pecking order, sort of like heads fighting for pecking order? Did you have to fight your way at all, or?
That's funny because up until then, I think I really threw a wrench into things sometimes. That people that are older than me, I think they have a lot of respect for me, even though people that are younger than me don't, because we kind of came along at a time when everything was changing, and then we had so much chance to change things the way that they were and influence them too. And a lot of people thought, well, if anybody wasn't going to change things, it was going to be Victoria, and they certainly wouldn't want it to be changed the way I was going to change it if they would have. And yet I did, and they didn't like that. They never cared for my way of doing things at all. It was just, just that would not have been the way that they would have. Everyone else was very Hollywood. Do you know what I mean?
No.
When I say Morgana today is like Hollywood, it was like everybody that's in that social kind of a position is like a star or a movie star. You're seeing everything is to be seen. Things that you say and funny things that you do are remembered, and your reputation is a big thing. Well, no one had ever approached anything from the idea before that you were really supposed to be respectable or nice or there just wasn't that kind of an attitude about things. And especially because I was so religious too. I know I got in trouble a bunch of times, and someone told me, Karen said once, not very long ago, they almost can't forgive anything except for the fact that they all traded their religion to become something, what they thought it was to be gay. And she said, what did they become? They in effect became nothing. You didn't give up your religion to become gay. No one ever asked you to do that. That was something that they did because they thought they had to do it. That was just them as gay people not understanding maybe themselves, religion, or those times at that period. And I always say, people will say what the church did to gay people, but I always say it's what gay people did to themselves because they were the church. And if that's what they saw themselves in their eyes through that kind of a thing, that meant that they felt like they were really guilty all along, that there was something that was wrong with them. And they carried that idea. I was one of the first people to believe, there really wasn't anything that was wrong with me. I just refused to believe that. I didn't think that I was a mentally or emotionally sick person. And a lot of other gay people up until that willing at the time, they would project the idea, yes, they were sick, but that it was all right to be that way. And I would say it's all right to be this way, but it's not all right to be sick. That was a change in period. That was a change in period. That was a real unpopular attitude in the movement. And that was, that was a self-realization time, and I can still remember watching things on television and seeing Stonewall, and that my idea about that was very radically different. I always felt like I was very close to the people at Stonewall. That was what I would have done.
I remember seeing that on TV. Wow.
I can still remember seeing that on TV, and that was when I started going down to state, and I took an interest in the riots that were going on down there, and we would go down and watch when we were in high school, and feeling like I was connected with a group of people in thought, and that was the way that I felt about it, and that I was angry, and I knew that I would fight for something that I believed in, that there was no question in my mind that there wasn't any sacrifice, there wasn't anything to give up, we didn't have anything. I realized that. I think maybe because of Augie, I'd seen that. I had seen people not always treat my dad's brother the way he should have been treated. That was to have an uncle that was gay during the 50s and 60s, and he was a very attractive man, and he came from a family with money, and they lived in a town where everybody knew everybody, and everybody liked them, see, but they all knew about my Uncle Augie, and isn't that a shame just if you wouldn't have been that way? And I knew how people thought of my dad's brother.
What you're saying then is all these different aspects of yourself caused you problems when you first went to the bar then, that the people didn't like you?
People always liked me. I think ideas that I had were always unpopular with them.
They still like you.
They still liked me,
Okay, but I mean, it sounds like that Beatrice just bestowed upon you the
Well, they
power,
kind
but certainly there must have been some struggle of some sort.
well, I'm trying to think about that time
I mean,
period.
I can't
And
remember a queen that everybody liked. You must have had enemies.
And I was, oh no, I always had enemies.
That's what I mean. Like, there must have been queens that didn't like you, that resented you, that you were an upstart, that, or something. There must have been.
I'm trying to think of people in my time period. Of course, when I was younger, though, people had a different opinion of me, than they do now, though, too, also. I mean, I wasn't the same kind of person. I wasn't the same way at all. And I think a lot more people liked me. I was young and pretty, and I ran with a popular group of people, and I was kind of a spokesperson for that group of people. And of course, there were people that didn't belong to that group of people, and I know that sometimes people saw us as we kind of thought of ourselves as an elite group of people, but then there were a group of people that were over us as far as wealth went, too. Do you know what I mean? We were just an established group of upper middle class people that all ran together, and I was just kind of the spokesperson for that group of people. But there was no leadership at all. I think that was the thing. There was no kind of direction or leadership involved in any of the the other groups of people. There were a couple people that kind of they get together and decide things what everybody else was going to do, but there's no individual leader or spokesperson. And yet, gay people at that time period were very gang directed, though. Do you know what I mean? They were very into gang.
Well, how did someone become then the queen or the powerful person? I mean, obviously, there must have been some way for her to have established that, and then yourself to establish that. What kind of was it just that simple, or wasn't there any way you had to go out?
Well, I'm trying to think because
or was that the group of people you were with were the ones on top?
The group of people that I was with was the group of people that were on top, and I ran with that group of people. And there wasn't a party I didn't go to. I was at everybody's house for this is what I try and get across to people all the time is how popular Jeff and I were when we were younger. I mean, we were really popular people, and we got in trouble for that a lot of the times. It would be like the blondettes, and people wouldn't like us, just because you were a popular group of people. But I was a survivalist. Miss Thompson would get married and faded and out of things and be gone, and she wasn't always constantly, in the public's eye. And that's about the same time that Rob I really began to run around with him. And Rob had come from another group of people, He came from that other group of people that had money and would be like Neil and Yuri and John. That group of people, they were older, established people that had money that were here, And that group of people, I don't know, they were real funny. They never really hated. There was a whole other new group of people that didn't like me. And it's funny because I think I became real popular too because then I kind of, there were a whole group of people that went to Kismet that was what I call your community people. And they were mostly Appalachian local Ohio people from like small gay towns. There were small towns that were all gay, and they would come to Kismet. And I did much better with friends that were just people sometimes that in social levels, I had a tendency to either dominate or to be intimidated by people, or to try to exist with people on an equal footing or basis. And with some people that came from families where there was more wealth involved, or it was maybe a little bit more newly acquired kind of aristocracy, that didn't go over so well because my family was a waning family with old money with no new wealth in it. And you just couldn't keep up very much for very long. And you couldn't compete with people on the same scale and social level. There just wasn't anything you were nice people, but it wasn't certainly the same thing as the life that they experienced.
But in the gay community, don't you think that's sort of less rigid, the lines?
But it was more rigid then.
You think?
The poor poor and the wealthy were drawn into fine lines of what you were considered to be. And we squeaked by with just making, because we came from upper middle class families, not middle class families. You know, I can understand there were people that were in our group of people, of friends, that were I considered to be less because they just came from maybe lower middle class families. They were considered to be up to par, because Ohio is very transient group of people, and the local people that are here are established, and the Appalachian people have always been prejudiced against. And there were no Appalachians in our group. You know, there were no Appalachians. They were first or second generation Ohioans that had come from Indiana or Illinois or Pennsylvania. You know, there were all other groups of people. There were no anybody that was from here. And groups of Ohio people living here not understanding why these new people wouldn't get along with the local people. They just simply had nothing in common with them. They couldn't, but I could approach people at their own levels, you know what I mean? Because I had been raised in the country. And I never felt like I was talking down to people to talk to them about their home life or a farm or their families. You know, there were other people that just would not talk to other people about their families. I suppose there's a lot of other different reasons for that. So I became friends with a lot of Appalachian people, and I was very popular with them, just because from the approach that I didn't act like I was better than they were, although I certainly didn't ever see myself in comparison level as being these people's contemporaries at all. It was just the attitude that I was raised with, what you had, your relationship with you know, with people of that social level. It was just a whole different, you weren't a snob about things like that, do you know what I mean? And those people liked me, I think, because of that. And I had a real good humor with those group of people. And those group of people, I think they respected me for that, too. I think, you know, the local people were like, well, she's fine. I don't mind.
Why do you think that there seems to be a need for like a not just queens, but just for like the blondettes? Why is it that kind of group seems to get in the public eye, like it gets to be Hollywood like stars, and why does that happen? I don't understand. I mean, the straight community doesn't really have that.
No, it doesn't have that. And you know, one of the reasons that I think gay people are still forming their culture. And that's something that we don't understand except for in sociological terms. And the gay community has never been studied from sociological terms. And it's going to be determined and influence a lot. I think the AIDS epidemic is going to influence a lot of things in the near future as far as coupling and small groups of people and intimacy being formed and group and support groups being very, very important. And essentially, again, and I think for a long time, because gay people were so gang-oriented in their clans, because it's a lower level of socialization, it's just a forming level of socialization, they don't have presented hierarchy. And so your hierarchy does not become an inherited hierarchy, as in a lot of social groups, or it's not determined by race or age or class or money. It becomes more of
by
a
family name, because, like, you know, in my hometown, certain people are in certain hierarchical positions depending on what family they come from. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, and in that kind of a clan development, a lot of times with gay people, I think there are some things, and you cannot deny this. There are social climbers that the only reason they make it is their good sex. And, you know, we've never ever approached it like that before, but we know that that's the way that it works in positions of money for people to get to the tops of jobs, and that's the way that it becomes with certain people as far as social levels. And it isn't that they were wonderful sex, maybe it's everybody always wanted this person, and this person slept with everybody, do you know what I mean? And they became very popular with everybody. They never were anybody's boyfriend. They were a trick. They were a good trick. They always got along with them. They had nothing bad to say about them. They were their trick. They became their friend because there was no threat where person hadn't been their boyfriend, so they couldn't be friends with them. They were everybody's trick. They were everybody's friend. They were everybody's pal. They were just popular with people. I think that's one approach, and then a personality approach is just more aggressive people in their personality will dominate situations and groups of people and just naturally take control of things. And more aggressive people are meant to be leaders, and I think they take over situations, they dominate groups, they give leadership and form the groups of more primitive people that need that support, kind of to think that somebody's in charge and they're not the person that is, and someone else makes the decision making, someone else influences fashion, someone else makes decisions and tells them what to do.
Well, how does that person establish that power?
That's interesting because I can pick out people that.
I don't think it's all sex.
No, I don't think it is all
like
sex.
there are too many people that are head honchos that just aren't whores. I mean, they just aren't having that much sex.
Yeah,
they're popular for some other reason. Must be. I mean, it's interesting because you don't have, for instance, you do not have economic power.
None at all.
You don't have grand parties that everybody comes to and they feel obligated to you.
No.
Or anything like that, and you certainly aren't having all the sex in the world that you'd like.
No.
You aren't giving people drugs, or you're on a deal, or
no.
or a doctor, or a politician, or so there must be some reason why.
And I'm not a politician, but I am politics. So.
Well, okay, that's true, but it's not like you're in elected office.
No, I'm not in elected office.
I mean, like in the straight community, like you're not a council person.
No, I'm not a council
senator
or anything like that.
There's all the typical people that have power in the other world.
I think of what I am, though. I think if Columbus wanted to give me a label,
you know, probably do.
And I mean, they would really want to, and it would be a legitimate objective that all people could look at. They would say, if we pick one person to represent Columbus, as far as being gay, and if there was one person that we wanted, and everybody wanted to know from Columbus, from somewhere else, they would pick me as an ambassador. I don't know about other people because I don't always know, but I think I'm a good representative of what it is to be Columbus and be gay. And I'm not sure that that's everybody's idea because I'm sure a lot of people would object to it. But I also know there are a lot of people who don't even like me that would say, if we had to pick one person, I think that we would pick this person even though I don't like her.
But why?
But why? I think I'm Columbus people at their best and worst.
Why?
Why?
How? I mean, what does that mean when you say Columbus people at their best and worst? There must be something.
I'm all the things that they either are not and would like to be, or I'm enough of the things that they are. I'm rural enough to be likable. You know, I'm religious enough to be tolerated. I'm social enough to be popular. I'm a political person enough to be seen. I just happen to strike on a lot of the right things, I think, you know, and that fits for general approval of other people better. People that don't like me will approve of me, though. But people that don't approve of me will never like me. You know, the saying doesn't work the other way around. But there are people that don't like me that approve of me. They'll say, well, I don't like her personally. As a person, I think she's all right. You know, it's just, I think that's more of a personality thing. I don't think I'm everybody's personality type. Although I think I'm likable as a personality. I'm unpopular because in a lot of ways, I have a lot of things that a lot of them don't have or don't want to talk about. You know, I have conscience, you know. And I have a background that I'm willing to admit and ready up to, where most of them want to, they don't all have good backgrounds, and most of them know that, and mostly everybody else knows that. But they don't want anyone else to say it, but they don't mind hearing that someone else had a seedy past, too, you know. But everybody has to live with their past. Everybody has a past.
So, would you say that people are afraid of you?
I know that people are afraid of me. I like them being afraid of me.
Well, how does that work? I mean, why would they be afraid of you? I know I'm afraid of a drag queen. still, you know that. You know, I have you go to the bathroom because I'm afraid. But you're never a drag. But still, it's like I don't know. I'm afraid of drag queens. But I also know that I'm afraid of, or I have been afraid of you, or I am afraid of you sometimes. And it's weird. It's not. I mean, I'm your friend. It still seems like. And I don't know how to explain it. It's weird, but it's like I just don't know if you understood. I was wondering if you understood what that is.
I can understand. I don't understand why people that are still my friends will be afraid of that.
Okay, I think sometimes because it's not you so much as it's Victoria.
Yeah.
We said this before, becomes bigger than life and gets totally out of hand. Like this helium balloon that just keeps bigger and bigger, and it's like you run into it all the time. It's like,
Well, Glenn once said this, and I think this is a real good description of you. If Victoria hates you, soon everyone hates you. Do you know what I mean?
Why does that work?
It becomes a universal.
Why?
Well, I think that goes back to two different things. Maybe one, when I divorced David, that's a good example. There were people on both sides of this whole thing that not wanting to choose sides, but rather than make Victoria unhappy, because I was such a miserable person, I made people take sides in things. You know, you either be on my side or I'll destroy you. We'll play war. You know, it was that I think is a very German familial approach to things. You either side with me or you're to be destroyed. You know, it's just how it works.
Well, how would
You
you
incorporate
destroy someone, though? I mean, how would you play war with them?
Well, it was never anything that was underhanded or dirty trickery.
But why would you be afraid of such a statement?
Because they would be ruined socially.
So it's social power.
It's a social level.
Okay, let's take for instance the Hermits.
All right.
Okay,
Okay. That's
okay.
good.
Why in the hell are those three people scared to death of you? I mean, well, they aren't on one level. I mean, but they are on another. Obviously, they're sending you anonymous notes. They must be afraid. And obviously, if they don't come up to you, this
one thing is,
I mean, when they're drunk, they make nasty comments.
They're passive aggressive people, and they would like a clean, open fight. And one of the things that we've said, we've all held a truce because we had to for a while, because in order to preserve TA's things. But then later on, it became, in my eyes, our family survived for a very long time, and I intend for it to survive for a lot longer. And in order for us to stay in a strategic social position, it would be very, very bad at a point when we're merging with other groups of people and becoming larger and taking in other people, if we were to become very, very unattractive and warlike in public. That's not how people deal with problems now. It's not how the bar is won. It's not how social politics is played. They can be maneuvered easily out in all sorts of other ways. They already don't have any friends. They don't have any social prestige or influence at all. And those things which are in my power can be used against them at a disadvantage. There's an easier way to do this. And I'm not saying that they're not going to get theirs, because all along they're being punished. But we're waiting, we're biding our time, and we've all said that too during Kate and Alicia. They all want one big time when they're allowed to pounce on it. I think it would be more like me to wait until we pretty much have the public on our side anyway.
How do you get the public on your side, though?
You get them to see things through your eyes. And you have to project an image of someone, and it doesn't have to be altogether unlike what's already going on. These people not making clear what the whole situation and knowing what you are and what kind of a person you are, and knowing that you take a stand on something, reveal everything in the situation and say, these were friends, these were people who were thought to be trusted, they were traitors. They did horrible things. Would you want these people as your friends? Would you take this person as a lover? Would you want them to influence your friend as another friend? And unanimously, the answer comes back no. These people become social pariahs. They're untouchable.
Why is Victoria believed over anyone else? I mean, just because you say it doesn't mean it's true, but it seems like people just...
But people believe that.
But why?
But why do they believe it? I think that people will know that what I'm going to tell them is going to be the truth. They don't want to hear it. And it's very unpopular to have, that's what Karen was saying to them again. you have kind of replaced to them what is, I'm not a deity or any, but I'm their symbol almost for what religion is. They don't believe in it. They don't mind in someone else believing it, and they don't mind someone else deciding what's wrong and right for them, because they really don't believe or don't too much care. And so they're easily influenced by the people that are their leaders, I think. And being told what they think is right and wrong and what's important. They don't really care as long as it does never have to come and fall back on them. Should that fall back, they're careful to the point of, I don't want this ever to happen to me, sort of thing. And some certain people, too, we've closed our eyes to about many great bad things, but simply because maybe the fact that the people, their familiarity with us, or the fact that we owed them too few or maybe favor. I remember talking to a granddaughter of mine not very long ago, and they have a sister who is not a member of my family, is a horrible person. And I asked him during Malco, why do they allow this person to be in so close proximity with our family when we know they tell everything about us? And that's never, we've always been very close shop about our own personal matters, and Jerry just think they owe her too many favors. And me saying later on to Velvie that you better get your favors paid off and get this person out of here. Because you're at a disadvantage. We owe this person too much. And I said, they owe us nothing. And they will give us nothing also, And that's a dangerous person to have around. And we're just in a position now where the politics, all we have to do is wait until a position where we can get Bob in public. And it won't be me that publicly humiliates him. It'll be Kate and Alicia, and it'll be the community doing it. It won't be Victoria doing it. I won't be cited out as the only one. There will be other people that'll be community leaders that'll be the ones that'll do it, and they'll say they all got together. You see, I'm not of the popular opinion that I take a stand on anything alone anymore. And it isn't because I'm afraid of that. It's just it looks very unpopular, and there are also other people that believe the same way that I do. And it's hard for me to get other people that they consider to be leaders in the gay community to do that. It's a power structure of being able for them to say, look, Victoria wasn't the only one that hated them. Everybody hated them. Do you know what I mean? Because that is in the matter of the truth. There are people, particularly people that I don't care for, but as a rule, I don't go out hunting after people that I just singularly don't just care for. It's only when I'm provoked or angered or my own people are bothered that I attack it all. And they knew what circumstances were. They have their heads and their hearts to thank for this now, because they knew what circumstances were, would they be to do certain things that they did, and yet they continued to do that. They never returned calls. They expected us to go to things at their house, And I don't understand their attitude at all,
And you talk about celebrities or Hollywood stars or whatever in the gay community. Why don't you try to define that a little more? Like, who do you consider to be the celebrities? I mean, like you said, when they come into the gay community, there isn't any hierarchy or power structure. And it just seems to be a human trait to want to have people to look up to or to
people that become models.
Yeah.
People, models, people with nice bodies, pretty people that know how to project themselves, people that have a little bit of psychology behind their sex, maybe. I don't think that sex is a big manipulating order in Columbus because we don't have the money hierarchy structure to move along, so there wouldn't be any advancement to put you anywhere anyway. And if you would be, most of the people are middle class enough to think you would be looked on as someone's lover, and lover would take on a lot different aspect as far as that would take. And there's only one person that I can even think of in that instance that even comes close to that description, and maybe that's Bob's lover. No one knows what his name is. Nobody knows anything about him. All they know is he's a younger man, and most people don't like him because he has all this, and he's Bob's lover. And he was just a smart little boy that saw a good thing and held on to it. That's all there was about that. He was a hustler.
Was he?
Yeah, he was. And he has no influence at all over any sort of a thing.
Do you think do you think it's generally true that
it would seem that there's a real value attached to butchness. I don't know if that was always true, but it's always been true since I've been out. Just been more virility. Okay, but it always seemed to me that the queens, the femmes, had power.
Ran things.
They ran things. Now, why would that be true?
Oh, let's see.
It doesn't seem to be right. It seems like if people look up to these virile butch men like Miss Thompson,
okay,
an example, why isn't it that
okay,
they have the power?
Okay, I think this is one of the things that you have to notice. People just being androgynous, whether male or female, there are certain qualities that we admire in each sex.
Right.
And one of the things is strength, and whether it's strength of body or strength of character. And a lot of times in men, that personality sort of thing that people are attracted to is strength of mind and strength of body. But with women, it's a particularly different thing. And a woman can maybe not be attractive. And the thing that makes her a popular person with other people sometimes is the attractiveness of her personality. But I think one of the things that people like in women is a personality greatness or an aggressiveness, because women aren't really supposed to be aggressive. They were always supposed to be a passive. And it's that androgyny that seems to be fulfilled in gay people, which is a predestined thing, I think, that all gay people are. And even though we're not supposed to be feminine, I think the people that realize that they do have feminine aspects and that those are part of them, even though people don't always like them, they're respected. Do you know what I mean? They become automatic leaders because they will take the lead. Other men being masculine and maybe the other virile things are not always aggressive. Maybe they're aggressive sexually, but personality-wise and socially they're not aggressive. See, you're not supposed to be that way, but that's the way that you are. And once you admit it, it's just like you've gotten over a point. It's just like if you admit you're gay, it's like it used to be years ago. If you could admit you were gay and tell other people that you were gay and not think anything of that, it would be all right for you to know that you were gay, but you shouldn't want other people to think and know that you were gay and that was all right. You shouldn't expect someone else to believe what you believe.
Do you think that the femmes had more control in the past than they do now?
No, I think it's the same. I think they always do. I think that's become a social structure of gay people, and I don't see gay people changing any because it's not likely that the way that we become gay people, however that is going to change. It's not going to be made easier. It might be easier to be gay, but it's not going to be easier to become gay because it's the same thing. That's already an influenced social thing. However it is, gay people become gay. Greater numbers of them are not going to become gay. It's always going to be the same, basically. And so I think that's an already established thing, and I think that's already an established part of our sociotype or culture.
It seems like the feminine people or the feminine people are so unpopular, and then people make jokes about them, just deride them all the time, and yet, you're right, it just doesn't make sense to me that they're put in such prominent positions as far as...
Because I think maybe they're overachievers. And anytime you're talking about just like women in groups of people like churches and clubs, it's always women that are not very nice, that maybe have more time to do it, that have less of a fulfilled emotional life. They have the time to spare. They are the doers. They're more duty-oriented. But certainly, usually, the funny thing with these kind of women, and a lot of times these kind of gay people, are that early in life, usually they're very successful in the social things, and their marriages usually come second, and they usually have successful marriages, but they're usually something that comes second. The lover has to almost know that, realize that, and accept that. And there are a lot of people that will not accept for being number two in life. They want to be number one, you know. And backseat marriage is not their idea of, they're not going to play. They don't see the politics enough in something to be involved in it, to be able to appreciate it, or the significant individual value or the quality of life that it enhances for other people. They see it purely personal, on a selfish terms of only what can there be for me, nothing beyond that.
Do you think that there is a entertainment quality involved in that the run-of-the-mill gay community needs to be entertained, needs to have a celebrity. I mean, celebrity, when you have celebrities, they're entertaining. They would be, you would call them celebrities. And do you feel that the queens gained power because,
They were entertaining.
well, think of the humor.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm sure.
Butch guy in leather is not about to tell jokes,
Yeah.
you know, or camp it up, or scream at somebody across the bar and make some cutting remark.
Yeah.
You know, to me, it seems there's some kind of appreciation.
Well, I think there's an appreciation of honesty and just about being more oneself. It's just, I can still remember seeing people like that, and I tried to emulate them when I was younger, and thinking, gosh, I wish I could say something like that, and finding myself 2 more years being able to say something like that. Not
You're
being
right,
so
David.
reserved or inhibited, or saying the right thing. Or think when I would see other people and think to myself, now how did they know, or how they were so witty, or how could they just say the right thing at the right time, you know? And they just always seem to just come up with the perfect words for the perfect situation. And being sarcastic and cutting and that bitchy kind of, you know, who's afraid of Virginia Woolf kind of humor just appealed to gay people. And they like to be able to see it, you know. They like to not think of themselves as being that way. But they had to acknowledge if they weren't going to be nice, that was the way that they were really going to be. And if they could be the way that they wanted to, that would be the way that they would be.
Well, try to think about why is, in other words, the verbalness, the having the right thing to say, that's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you emulated then, and that's what you want to be able to do.
I wanted to be able, it's like E.F. Hutton, when they talk, everyone listens. Do you know what I mean? And I'd seen that in my family. There were personalities that were entertaining enough. There were always people like that in my family. Mm-hmm. And people would just shut up and listen. And I don't know how they must have learned. That's royalty. You know, that's Hollywood. That's very theatrical. That's acting, is what it is.
I know I've been in situations where it's almost as if something will happen at the bar, or somebody will say something, and people will almost turn to you and expect to pronounce something. It's like, what is Victoria going to say now? And I've always thought that was amusing. It's like, well, what do you have to say?
Well, it's like the voice of your public. It's the voice of your opinion. You know, it's not popular, but it's there. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like lines are written for you. Someone said, I went into a bookstore today to pick out cards. Libby and Jan, who have known me for years, and looked at beautiful ones, and there was one of a woman being tied to a stake and burning, and it opened it up and said, Jerry Farwell loves it. I screamed and laughed and thought, oh, how wonderful. I just love this guy. I love to say it. But it's just not me. I could never send that card to someone and pull it off. You know what I mean? Or I saw another card, and it was, I just want to be rich, happy, have a boyfriend or something like that. And it opened up, and be happy all the time. But the cards that I bought seemed to be more me, where I bought a card with a cupid on it and an arrow and a peacock, because they just were a lot more me. I have to be a lot more me as a person. And I think in order to do that, it's to say things the way that I think them or say them. I think one of the things that people have been real popular about saying this about me, Victoria never says anything that it's usually she's saying what everybody else thinks. But just see, other people won't say it, but I will. I just have the gut. I don't care whether they like it or not if I'm going to say it. You know, it's the fact that you're going to say it.
So it seems like a prerequisite for being a powerful queen would be that you're not afraid of
Disapproval of other people.
you're not dependent upon the other people.
No,
Being
You do not have to rely upon other people to, that's pride, that's dignity in oneself, that you do not have to depend on your worth by other people's standards. You must carry your own worth as a person around inside of you, your own approval of yourself and what you think of yourself. And the big thing, I think, as a gay person is, why would you have left heterosexual society and not wanting of what their approval was? Why would you then come into a gay society and want their approval of what it was awesome. You don't need their approval of what it is either. You don't need anybody.
Well, I'm interested in hearing about the first time you went to the wall, or how you found out about it.
Okay, the first time I ever heard about the wall, I was still married and I lived in Upper Arlington. And I heard friends of mine from OSU tell me about this place at OSU. And I didn't stop there the first time, but I just drove on through because I used to live in Arlington and I worked at the Marriott out east, and I was driving home and I took a delay and came up Fifth Avenue, went up High Street and drove right by it, and I saw all these young men out front on the walks, walking around, and they waved at me. And I didn't stop. I drove directly on through to Arlington because I was a monotonous married person. I didn't do things. But I wanted to know where it was at. I was real curious.
What time of day was that when you went by?
It was late in the evening. I used to work nights, and it was around 2:30, 3 in the evening. And I still really didn't believe that, that gay people went there. I just thought that there were people there, and I just happened to see something. It was just coincidental. I just didn't really believe it at first.
So then when did you start going there regularly?
Well, about 1975, I was single again, and I had been going to OSU, and I ran around with a lot of students that they ate together every day in the lunchroom. There were 3 tables of students that ate on the south side of the cafeteria, and it was segregated. The black students sat on the side with the gay students on one side of the cafeteria, and we all ate together. And they said that they were going to go to the wall one night after the bar, and that it was really grand and a lot of fun, and that I should go and I'd have a good time. So I went to the bar with my friends, and afterwards, I went to the wall with them in a car. And sure enough, there were people cruising around in cars and walking around, and there must have been 40 people there that night. There were like all these people. And I was amazed because other than a bar, I had never been anywhere where there were gay people at before.
So, what was the? They always went to the bar first, and then you went to the wall, or did you just go to the wall and then go to the bar?
No, there was a particular. You had a routine for the day of the fashionable, in-crowded gay people at OSU. Began breakfast in the morning, and that was amid flurried calls of coffee and phone calls to your nearest gay neighbor, whoever it was. You lived in little subdivisions and little ghettos. We lived in Northwood, and they called that near Northwood Terrace Convent or Victoria School for Girls then. And it was a lot of gay people lived in Northwood Terrace Convent. And we all lived together, and we'd get up in the morning and come out on the balconies in our bathrobes and scream at each other and have coffee and call each other up. Well, then after that, you'd go to classes, and after that, then the fashionable thing was to have lunch in the gay part, the student union, and then after that, you'd go to the French Field House and you'd lay out in the gay beach, and after that, evening would come, and you were usually invited to go with the other gay neighbors for dinner, and we'd go and have dinner together. Then after dinner, then there would be the gentle, what was called the promenade on High Street. And that would mean, toward early in the evenings, anyone that could be identified in the gay community had to be seen on High Street at a certain time, walking up and down and viewing each other. And at those times, people that you never spoke to before, you could automatically address and say anything you damn well pleased to. Those people then could talk to you, and it was like interrogation time. They could find out anything they wanted to about gossip about anybody else. After that, people went to Tuttle Park in the evening, and then that was sundown time. Then it was cruise, and it was kind of funny. People didn't just go there to have sex. It was a social thing. Gay people were into social things then, and anything
other than just a bar that they could find was kind of important for them because it was a culturalization thing. And then you would go home, take an early nap in the evening, get ready, get fresh for the bar, Charles Rich yourself up and go downtown. Then after the pleasures of the evening at the bar, then you would go to the wall. If, and not before, you had gone to Lum's. Lum's was so stringent that you were allowed to only sit, gay people had reserved sections and tables for them. And the important gay people had tables saved for them. No one ever sat at my table. No one ever crossed me. That was Victoria's table. That's where you sat. There was a hierarchy to the whole thing. There really was. Then after that, you go to the wall. The wall would be social. It would be donuts. It would be coffee. It would be chat. It would be a very instructional fare. It would be you would find out about something. You would have the pizza truck would stop right there on Oakwood and deliver little pizzas people would buy. People would chat. Then people would get together and say, would you like to come over to my house? A lot of times the evening would culminate in a fancy kind of breakfast or tea at my house. People would come over after the wall to come to my house or somebody else's house for a party. People would get together, say they wanted to party, go somewhere, and the day would begin all over again the same way it had been done the day before.
What was the origin of your name Victoria? Did they call you that there?
No. They never called me Victoria until Anthony died. They never called me. They called me Margaret. Because
Margaret?
They called me, my name was Margaret. My christened name was Margaret. I was named Margaret after Margaret Tudor, because I was a descendant of Margaret Tudor, and Margaret Hamilton, because I could do the Wicked Witch of the West. And they loved that. They just loved that. They had never ever heard anybody imitate her before. And they would just scream. They'd say, well, now do the Wicked Witch.
So what did you start your name then? Or?
No, I didn't start my name. I didn't want to be called Victoria.
You didn't?
No, I never wanted to be called Victoria. That's real funny. It's real interesting. When Anthony died, and I didn't go anywhere then for a long time after that, and I had lived in this big house in Arlington. Well, then the church, it was a parsonage that had to do with my father's job, and the church rehired a minister, and we were forced to find another place to live. I moved on to Northwood, and I kind of went into seclusion. But I saw neighbors, but I didn't really go out. And that was such a change for me. I had been such a social person and such a big part of the gay community up to that part. They really objected to it. They people that were used to seeing me all the time they really felt like they had some kind of control or say-so on your life. And they objected to the fact that you were almost like a public image sort of person then. And they objected to your not being around for them. It was kind of like symbol for motherhood had diminished, and they wanted you called back into your duty. They didn't think you were doing your job, so to speak. And I didn't care for it at first. And then I thought, well, it's not so bad. They could call you worse things. And it did carry a little bit of respect to it, which a lot of the names and things didn't then. And it was usually different. In those days, they always said Queen Victoria, too. They never said just Victoria. And I liked it then. It wasn't until the Queen never got dropped until I think about 1977 or so. Then they'd stopped by then with the Queen stuff, which was real nice because it was embarrassing. People even did all sorts of things. I'd come up and bow and kiss your fingers and grovel at your feet. Oh, that wasn't any good at all because that started rumors like we heard once some niece of mine's cousin said I had a throne in my house above Larry's when I lived up there, and it was covered with lipstick from all the drag queens kissing me. And if you'd try and approach the throne, you'd slip off. Terrible things like that. it does awful stuff. So it was kind of a two-edged sword. It was powerful because it was important in the gay community then to be somebody. An image was everything. And since people really didn't know anything about homosexuals, and that was the homosexuals' knowledge of each other, they lived on what was rumored to be whatever you were. And there was so little that was known about anybody, really, that everything was an image that was projected or presented. And so that was very important to have that image. And, but it was a two-edged sword, too. Anybody that was that popular, that was that well-liked, was just as equally to be despised or, hated, because there were people that just wouldn't like you for no other reason than if you were popular or if a lot of people liked you, too. And so that caused problems.
Well, did you consciously then try to create an image because you knew that?
Oh yeah, the image was developed out of a culturalization, one thing, but then it was cultivated out of a desire to meet my own needs and develop that. It brought respect. It brought dignity. It carried with it some weight. It was a matriarchal symbol. It enriched the matriarchal symbolism for me. It developed itself very well, and it presented itself well to a development. So I just kind of carried the ball. It kind of got started, and we thought, well, there was no reason ever to not develop it further. It is. You are your own culture, your own history, and it was something rich and diversified and different. And we thought, well, why not develop it and make it more? And since it was me, I had every right to be able to make as much of me into that as I could do. So we just did that.
Did you do drag more than? Because I've only ever seen you drag like twice.
I did drag a lot when I was very young. When I was about 16 through 18, I did drag. I was Miss Fort Wayne one year. And of course, then they made a big to-do about that. Why? I hadn't been Miss Fort Wayne since 1972. Well, then they dragged that all the time. See, and if you had been a drag queen just once and done it once, it was like, you were a drag queen for life, forever. And it didn't make any difference how many times you'd done it. Probably because transvestism wasn't very understood even within the context and isn't now of the gay community. But later then, I don't know. When I got into my real grandmothery period, I emerged again in dresses because I wanted to break stereotypes. I was so stereotyped that people had a vision of me that they couldn't comprehend or they couldn't break it. And I wanted to break all those stereotypes. I wanted them to understand that you couldn't put people in little boxes and molds and make it fit, that everybody was different and everybody could be anything they wanted to. But black dress was kind of a symbol for me. But the big thing that later was the big symbol for me was hats and fans. Every year I had to have a different hat and a different fan. And a lot of people, just for years and years and years, I had a different hat every year. And they looked to see what hat I'd wear. And always around Easter time, the hat would appear. And then the fans would be with me about summertime because the discos were hot. And it helped, too. It'd keep the smoke out of your face. You could cover your face. You could gossip behind it. You could do a lot of things with a fan. It was a cheap prop,
Well, was that the style? And did everybody have fans?
A lot of people had fans. It was a fag fad. And it was something that I just thought I liked fans. I thought they were useful. And it became kind of a symbol for me. So that was kind of my own kind of little personal symbol, was a fan. That had always kind of been a traditional historical symbol for queens, too. And that I liked, I liked the symbolism in that.
You mentioned your grandmother period. How, for instance, did you end up with Richard as your mother? Now, explain this in the context of when you were married and stuff, too, because I never really understood all this.
Your mother, when you're gay, is who brings you out. Well, when I was younger, I really wasn't brought out. I had gone into the gay community as a young person.
This is in Fort Wayne.
In Fort Wayne, and had done things. And then, see, I was single. Well, then I married, see, when I was in high school. And I was married for a long time. And we were together for 6.5 years. Well, after Anthony's death, I emerged into the gay community. And by that time, I was young. But I wasn't at the age when most people came out. Well, Richard was going to OSU at that time. And I emerged, kind of full grown kind of person already. But I met Richard, I guess, before I went. He was friends with me in college, and he knew me when I was married. And in fact, I can still remember he wasn't officially really my mother. He was kind of everybody's mother, kind of a matriarchal figure at that time, and she just kind of mothered everyone along. But I can still remember when I married Anthony, she had made such a big to-do about, now that was successful because I had married a doctor, and that was bringing, she looked at things in the context of, she wanted gay people to be respectable. And up until then, so many people hadn't been. You were cheapened by the lifestyle, by the way that society looked at you. And then a lot of people did that to themselves. And there wasn't a lot of respect or dignity that was carried with that. It was the way that homosexuals were viewed by society. And she had begun to look at it from the facts that we were beginning to kind of assimilate ourselves into a larger culture by going into fields of professionalism. And she thought that was very respectable and very, very good. And she looked at that in a manner that, that would bring some sort of dignity and respect to the gay community. And in that, she kind of championed me as her daughter. Well, then, that was her big kind of hope, was for me when I hadn't been married. And then the marriage was a good marriage. And then after Anthony died, she looked at it as, she was a very realistic person, and she looked at it not only as a relationship that was lost, but she looked at it through the eyes of the gay community, the loss that it had suffered for the fact that had been taken away, and there was a missing of something, that respect and dignity and position, like a lot of the older gay people are that are married and are professional people, but we were out gay people. And there were so few professional people that were out then. She looked at that in terms of his death as a great loss of personal dignity to the gay community.
So then when did you start having your children?
My first children, I had my first daughter, we got in 1970, I think we got her in 1974. And we were married then, and that was the first daughter I had, even when we were married. And his name was Johnny, and we helped put him through barber school. We paid for him to go to barber school, and we just took care of him when he was sick, and when he would come home drunk, and we'd put him to bed, and, we told him we were his friend, and we wanted to be his friend, and that, we weren't interested in sex, because when you're young and you're gay, it's kind of like a sack of potatoes. You're tossed from bed to bed, and there are not a lot of people that are really interested in you for being you. Well, we just thought that was, very unfair. And we saw a lot of very emotional young people that really weren't ready to leave their own parents' home and going out in the world yet. And they really needed the affection and attention, of parenting still. And we thought that that was very important, that they should have that support and that love from other people that understood, they're being gay. And it was hard because in those days, it wasn't so easy to be gay. I don't think it's ever going to be, but then it was very hard. And when people told their parents, a lot of times they were thrown out of their homes. They had no homes. They had no places they could spend holidays or no place to go for Christmas or things like that. And so we became surrogate parents. We mothered and we celebrated birthdays and Christmases, and we made a big to-do about when they came out, and we always told them, that was like a birthday almost, and you celebrated that. You, will be now, 12 years, and that was like a special day. You always remembered your coming out day, and they had parties in those days for that. That was something they did a lot. I don't know. Then I had a lot of children then after that. And even at an early age, then my children would see that, and they would be, gay people are like anyone else. They have parental feelings, and they would see other people hurting and want to give that love to someone, and they just naturally would kind of take over and kind of mother the other ones. They took care of each other. And we had a unit family for a long time that consisted of 3 of my daughters, and then one of my sisters and I lived in a house with one of my granddaughters too. And that was my first granddaughter, and she and I are real close now. She always says to me, "You are the only person I can tell a secret to, and I know that if I tell you that it's a secret, it won't go anywhere else." And they didn't quite understand her. I don't know. I don't think it's sometimes like real parents. The parents are not as close to the parents, but the minute that you have someone that's a grandchild, for some reason you're a little bit closer to them than the others. But we were always real close. Well, then there were different years. I don't know. Different things brought different events. Small towns, Mansfield and Lancaster, had during different years large groups of gay people that came out at a very early age. Grove City one year particularly did. We got 20 from there. Well, that was a large outpouring of young people in the gay community at such an early age. And being at an early age, they had a couple of things that are commodity in the gay community, which are youth and beauty. And they are things that are easily made up and can only be dealt with during a certain year span because they'll be over real fast. And these were the real popular people, and they needed to kind of be sheltered. They needed to be directed. They needed to be kind of watched and taken care of. So it was during those years that the grandmother kind of image kind of really developed more. There was it disposed itself as there was a need for it, really. And it grew, and at different times it wasn't so well developed. The last 2 years now, I haven't had the need for it so much. I haven't had the need for it, I think, because of the relationships that I've been in with other people. And the needs of those other people haven't been there either. There haven't been large numbers of gay people that needed mothering. It was almost like a flock with a head bird to it, or a brood or something like that.
Well, do you think that idea is dying out then? Family?
No, I don't. I don't see that as ever. I see that as something that'll probably be sustained in my lifetime and a lot of other gay people's lifetime. But I think it's something that to be able to be a parent doesn't mean that you genetically produce an offspring. I think that it has to do with sharing things, whether it's your own life's experiences or your love or your affection or your material wealth that you have to your disposal. And I think that parenting is something that it just is different. It is, you look at it in context of the need to be able to do it. Just because you're homosexual doesn't mean that you can't parent or do those kind of things, or you can't be a parent. And it's I don't know. I'm real eager sometime. I would like to have a foster child, and I got okayed to be a foster child. And that's real rare because they don't hardly ever okay gay people to be foster parents at all.
Did other people have families? There were rival families?
Yeah, there were rival families. There were rival groups. Ours was, of course, we were based on an aristocratic structure, and people in our names always took the name of monarchs or aristocrats. There were other groups of families, and they were quite not unlike our own Broad Street Breakfast group, the Blondettes, groups of people and they would do cutesy little things. They had their own culturalization, their own nicknames for each other. They would be named after movie stars or frumpy housewives or church ladies groups, or it just was more directed toward where they had kind of come from. And maybe, I think a lot of times that wasn't a culturalization thing, that was it was a kind of a humor that a lot of times made fun of, it was a reverse humor, and it kind of poked fun at the kind of women that you had been surrounded with in your own lifetime. And a lot of times the people just took on those forms and things that they were familiar with because it was easy to imitate, something that had been seen a lot.
Did you have more fun then?
Did I have more fun? I think I had more fun then, but I don't think that the quality of my life was as rich or as good as it is now. I'm a lot more settled as a person now. Then I was finding myself, and I think any time that you're not that I'm done or anything, but I've kind of widened out to a nice kind of middle-aged gap where I'm comfortable, and I've kind of made a name for myself in the gay community, and I'm real comfortable with that, and I don't see it likely to change too much. I think because the times were exciting. When you're coming out and you're dealing with that process, you're making friends and you're experiencing things so much for the first time. And to be gay, a lot of being gay is just experiencing these things. And everybody has got to go through that, and they need that. And that's an enriching process, and it's a enjoyable process, and it's sometimes it's a very painful process. It's a hurting time. It's a growing time because it's a time when you're learning things. Sometimes hard knocks through life, but you look back at it, and even the bad things, you think to yourself, "Now I think that's funny, or that's grand, or it's hilarious, or I remember that, and I like that because it was fun, and because I got through it." And if you're any kind of a total person at all, I think that you're sentimental about things in your life, and you look back on things like that with a nostalgia. That would have been what high school would have been like to most heterosexual people. But a lot of times, because society denied us the joys of that, by being ourselves, we had to wait until years after that when we could be with our own kind of experience any kind of real joy. And that happiness that you look back on is because of that joy. It's a celebration experience. It's a coming out. It's a celebrating your sexuality and yourself.
What kind of people were at the wall? Were there any particular people besides yourself that were well known? Were there any characters of any sort?
There were a lot of characters.
Or were these people older?
They were all different age, from real young teenagers who were not old enough to be there, who could drive up. And I used to have a granddaughter now that's in her 20s that at the time was only 14. She'd get up in the middle of the night, get in the car, and drive to the wall. Well, there were older people that went there too.
Car at 14.
Oh yeah, she drove the car illegally in the middle of the night. She'd get up, drive the car to the wall, and be there.
Her
And
parents
the funny,
didn't even know she was gone.
no, never. And we sit back and we laugh about it today. Little Lombardo boy, he'd drive up there in the middle of the night. There were a lot of characters then. Gay people were really into the kind of image thing that I said before, and you really got wild personalities, and you'd see all different really sorts. We did wild things then. One 4th of July, I directed traffic, sat on the band poster on the side of the road, had sparklers in my hat and waving them in my arms, and was directing traffic. We had another friend, my best friend, who was attended at my wedding, was named the Baroness and was a organist in a local church, and he was just a scream and was a school teacher. And he would show up in big floppy hats all the time was his symbol. And Delaware, Ohio, where he taught school. But there were a lot of really wild people. And it was fun, and people would scream and run around and carry on. And it was almost like a big playground for children. We had a ceremony every year. We had an official ribbon cutting ceremony at the wall, where I would show up with a black dress and crown on my head. We'd put a ribbon across the road, and I'd cut it with a head shears.
Do this in the middle of the night?
In the middle of the night, in the evening, and there would be crowds of people. We had 100 people there one evening. They put me in an open convertible and drove me all the way from Ties downtown to the wall, circled around the wall. We had a parade, and I threw marigolds from the back of the car, dressed and dragged a crowd.
What did the police think of all of this?
The police were very nice in those days because they were used to the wall and they didn't try and stop it at all. There would be fag wars between the hustlers and the queens. And every time there was a war, the hustlers would try and catch me. The police would say to the queens, now put Victoria in a car and drive her as far away from here as you possibly can before she causes trouble. Because they will try and get Victoria and there will be a fight. Well, it always worked that way. They'd drive me away and 10 minutes later I'd be back, standing on the street and waving to the police. And the police would say, now Victoria, you have to leave or we're going to put you in the car and we're going to drive you away. Or they'd ask me to get in the car and they'd drive me away, and they were always very nice. The police officers were nice to the gay people at the wall then. It wasn't later until a bad image was developed through poor publicity, through the Lantern probably, that we had trouble with the police at all. The police were very often cooperative, and they didn't care.
What kind of things went on with the hustlers? You mentioned that there was wars. Why was there trouble?
Well, there had been an unwritten law for a long time that the west side of High Street was for hustlers and that the east side of High Street was for gays. That meant no money offered on one side and kind of a freedom on the other. Well, they made a big to-do about the fact, that they weren't gay, but yet they were having sex with men for money. Well, that never went over real well with people, and especially with the real outgoing queens who had a tendency to call nasty things back and forth across the street, which would antagonize them on. Well, they'd like to show how butch they were, and they'd come over and want to fight. Well, the queens weren't beyond getting out of a fight. A lot of times you'd see them pull, 3-inch razor blades out of, pump spikes and go at somebody, They weren't sissy kind of people. A lot of them had come from small towns, and having grown up gay in kind of a hostile environment, they were used to kind of fighting for their own. So little groups of people led by more important kind of self-celebrated queens would kind of lead little riots on against the hustlers. Usually these were championed by myself, who would sit in the foreground and scream all sorts of obscenities at these people as much as I could. And I'd be driven around by my grandsons or people that had married my daughters, who were very butch kind of barrel gay people that would defy the hustlers to come even try get near me, because the minute they did, the butch queens that were related to me would just beat the shit out of them.
What about the straight guys?
That came later?
The ones that like today are causing troubles. Or they weren't there then? It was...
We had straight people because in 1976 I was beaten up very badly. And the attacks that went on during that time were by straight people would pose as gay people and come in cars and vans and try and get gay people to get in with them, and then they would beat them up. When I was beaten up, I know it was a shock to the gay community that, one of their people could be beaten up, that bad. And my neighborhood, which was all gay, reacted very badly to the whole thing. They went back to the wall that night to look and wait for the people and founded them, and they all had axe handles and axe handled in all the windows and the doors of this van were the people that had gotten me, that were still looking for other people. And then they proceeded to spray mace in the people, and they roughed them up a little and told them, they really were upset about me having been beaten up, and that if they had any other friends that did anything of this sort, that they would deal with them personally again on this own kind of level. And that kind of slackened things down then for a while, because I think that anytime somebody is faced, with a kind of more forceful, attitude, that they back down because they don't think gay people are really going to fight back for their rights at all.
Tell a story about Rob.
Oh. One night there were greeters that were at the wall, and they were trying to get us And I was with a little bevy of granddaughters of mine, and they were dispersed, kind of chattering around in the bushes and walking through the alleys and things. A car had come around, and it had just beat up somebody, and we knew that. We were being very careful and kind of taking to ourselves and then going in cars and hiding. And we had seen the car come around, but we were very careful to elude it all the time. Well, my best friend was a big person, 6 foot something, and way over 200 pounds. A big man that had been a football player in Bexley in high school. And his nickname was Jaja. Well, he was an antagonistic kind of person. And upon seeing the approaching car, he told me, he said, now, Eugenia Victoria, you get back and sit in those bushes until I tell you you can move. Well, he just ripped a great big cinder block. It must have been 3 by, a foot and a half long out of the wall. And as the approaching vehicle went through the alleyway and entered up into the side street, which was very badly lit, he made a scream like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, reached forward, and sent the cinder block flying right through the windshield. It bounced out on the hood, steam went up, and the people inside screamed and just acted worse, tried to get outside and said, my God, they're trying to kill us back, or something like that. But then we got the hell out of there. She grabbed me and we left. But we kept a chunk of the brick, and we have it. We kept it. It stayed in the mausoleum. We thought it should be preserved for posterity's sake. I should put a little label on it.
What did the police think of that kind of stuff? Didn't the street people call the police?
Well, it was like the time that I went to jail for stealing a fern.
Wait a minute, you gotta tell this story now.
During the early 70s, plant thieving became very fashionable with gay people. And they would rip them right off the porches. And you know how discotheques were full of all these potted palms and things? Well, gay people would think it was chic to have these things in their home, and not having a lot of money and being pressed for cheap entertainment. They would take to their cars after bars, and of course this was led. It was a social thing. At first it was a fad. It was started by me on a dare, and then became the polite thing to do after bars. I think Rob dared me. We would come away with 6-foot ficus trees, 30-pound ferns. Our house looked like a conservatory. Well, that became a little out of hand, and then suddenly on Arlington's news one night, they had the great Arlington plant thief and showed all these porches with missing flowers on them. Well, it got out of hand. The people would put up little strings with bells across them, and I would cut the strings and write little notes. You fools, you can't fool me, signed the Arlington plant thief. One woman on Lane even put out a reward for a fern she'd had for 28 years. I returned it. We were called into court, and the judge made a big thing to it.
How'd you get caught?
Oh, well, that's another story. Going into Lum's one night for afternoon bread, after the bar breakfast, Jaja was mad and picked up a brick and just threw it through the Morse floor's window.
Oh, no!
Well, then we went inside. Well, he'd do all sorts of crazy things. Like people would eat their dinners, and then he would go outside, walk over to this clothing store next. That's when people wore those shoes with the top of the platform heels. He'd kick out the window, set off the alarm, go back in, and as all the managers from Lum's went out to inspect the harassment, whatever was going on High Street, he'd gather up all the checks from the tables in Lum's gay people and set them on fire in an ash pit. There was no evidence. People could leave as they liked. We were leaving the restaurant, and we saw the hole, and the thing had already been thrown, and we didn't do it. And there were these nice ferns just standing. So I reached in the window and grabbed one, gave one to me and one to Miss Thompson, and we fled in our little cars. Well, unbeknownst to me, at this time a taxi cab was watching this whole event and got our license number, turned us into the campus detective. He found out who we were and came to our houses to interrogate us. He then asked questions and asked my female roommate at that time, why didn't the leaders of the gay community get together and put this plant thief behind bars? And she said, that's impossible. Victoria's sitting right here, and she's scared to death of Jaja. So it wasn't something that was also cut and dried. It was something they kind of got carried away with. We're very out of hand. before we knew it, everybody was stealing plants, and no longer people had things on their porches, and every gay person that was fashionable to have stolen plants and to brag about it. It was the in thing to do. But we heard of people in smaller towns like Mansfield who never stopped with just plants. They invaded cemeteries, stole garden statuary. We even knew people personally who stole meatloaf off grills, sheets off the lines, and vegetables out of gardens. It just got carried away.
So anyway, you went to court.
So we went to court, and the lawyer said to me, "Look, we can't have all you queens sitting in court pointing accusing fingers at each other." And the judge, well, this was the fact too, was the detective happened to be gay and liked me. Well, the judge was very nice and said this was a nice Christian boy. It was a college prank. It was the only thing he'd ever done, and I didn't have a legal record. So he charged me $18 for the fern and let me off, and that was that.
And nobody else got caught for it.
No one was ever caught that we knew. They one other time, oh yes they did, they caught 2 people and I was with them. And they asked them, who's the head of this smug ring? Isn't there some chief woman that's running this? And they said, we don't have to tell you nothing. They told them.
All right, tell us some more about some other people on the wall, some other characters. You can tell us about Zsa Zsa if you want, because you didn't say much about. Where did you meet him? Tell us about where.
Oh, I was at a barbecue at Dr. Plotnick's.
Oh, no.
In Gahanna in 1974. And a big white.
How appropriate a barbecue.
Oldsmobile, yes. Pulled up.
Who were they burning?
I don't know, they were organized crime then. Pulled up and went over a split rail fence, drove over a campfire, and launched into a tree. And this person screamed and flew out of the car with 2 shish kebabs and came over to me and said, "You're eating barbecue with me." Well, I was just flabbergasted with this person. Here's a 6'4" person that, they live in this house with every room has a chandelier in it. They just have the worst reputation in the whole gay community. They're the most fun to be with person. They're just scandalous. Everything is just a riot, they say. They had an incredible vocabulary of gay linguistic comments I've never heard before. And their lifestyle was incredible. They didn't work if they couldn't happen to. And he just had flawless antiques and big flower gardens and aviaries full of exotic birds and fish and just lived like Croesus. But he was just the most wild, just the most eccentric gay person there was, practically. And he'd do wild things. He'd walk his Afghans down Broad Street in the middle of traffic, and he had a mother duck with 8 little duckies. And he'd cross them across the Broad Street wearing nothing but a bathrobe on in the middle of the afternoon. Just did insane things. It's just incredible. It's hard to remember all the things that he did. He was just he had a little owl as a pet.
Where did he get his name from?
He used to do drag.
Did he really?
Yes. And one year they went to the Berwick, which was the gay people's socialites' big ball of the year. And he went, and friends of ours, who were named Ava and then Magda, and of course he was Zsa Zsa, went as the Gabor sisters and did a Hungarian Rhapsody comedy routine. And after that he was christened Zsa Zsa. They never called him anything else. It was stuck. It had stuck for life, and for the rest of his life, people were coming up to him, and this was 8 years later, and saying, "Oh, Zsa Zsa, how are you?" He used to imitate Zsa Zsa Gabor. He could do it real good, too. Well, then you had your drag queens.
What Michael Fennell? Is he around?
Oh, Michael was always around. As long as I was around, Michael was around. And he was a last of the diehard kind of hippie, kind of gay people from the 60s. Kind of a beatnik kind of a character. He kind of they were like Elton John. You saw a lot of them in there. I named now. It's like a dinosaur, fossil queen or something. He would put glitter in his hair and was very affectatious. I thought myself, this person was the gayest person I had ever seen in my life. I saw quite a few real queer people, but he had a manner and a style to himself, and it was very airy and very kind of feminine. And when you go to his house, it was like the Sugar Plum Fairy lived there 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It was tinsel, Christmas tinsel, and glitter, and Christmas tree lights, and you were served Night Train Express like it was out of chalice bowls or something. It was just all insane. It was just nuts. Oh, they were kind of gypsy kind of gay people. And my mother was kind of like that, I guess. She was very ethnic and long nails and gypsy clothes and told fortunes and very earthy kind of organic person into plants and animals and horoscopes and a lot of them were pagan white witches. They put spells on people and dear, I don't know. It was kind of strange. But I think one of the things that made you notice gay people that were real outgoing, that were very very much out in the gay community, was there was such a big turnover in the gay community. People left. They'd come out, deal with their sexuality, and then they'd move to another city. And there weren't very many people that stayed around for very long. And so the outstanding ones that did stay around really became community members, and they were very much always in the presence of the public, and so you noticed them all that much more. What was seen so much and so often that you noticed it quite a bit.
Did most people belong to families when they first came out? Were they joint families, or were there a lot of independent people that ran around?
There was a time when a family thing was almost, it would almost had a social standing to it. And that was, I think, 75 through the 80s. That was I think it was support groups were being acknowledged by psychologists. And gay people launched themselves into that with a readiness that was just very acceptable. But there were always a lot of independent people. But then it was a fashionable thing to do for gay people.
Well, how did a person learn how to be gay? I mean, was this family structure used? Was there some certain, I mean, like with your own children, would you say now you should do this and that?
Oh yeah, it was real structured within different families. You had different things, and of course you could do what you wanted to do. Ours was very structured, and you were allowed and not allowed to do certain things. When they go to the Kismet, they weren't allowed to dance with people that weren't received in gay polite society at all. They couldn't go home or have dates with people that weren't received, really. There were a certain group of people that were received and respectable, and then there were another group of gay people that weren't considered acceptable. And if you belonged to what was considered to be an aristocratic family, you weren't allowed to mingle with. It was a structured, rigid form of kind of hierarchy. It was considered there was a certain social prestige to being invited to stay with certain members. We taught them certain things. They had to learn how to make tea, to be kind of entertained, to be a hostess or host. You had to be able to be witty. They had to be able to converse. They were taught things that were considered to be important for gay people at that time. Everybody had to learn how to dance, and if you couldn't dance, you were quick made to learn how to dance very fast within certain ranks of things like that, because it was a social structure that led you on to meeting people. Yeah. And without it, you were in a midst to groups of people and to relationships that would really cut you off from things. So it was important, and it was thought important that you learn these things that you could deal with the other people.
But for instance, the camp humor, did they come from wherever knowing how to do that, or did they learn it?
That was funny because I think that's a personality trait. And I think that there are certain gay people that have that trait, and they're just very, very humorful to begin with, and very colorful in personality. And I think it was encouraged by other people that had that same kind of opinion and outlook on life and humor, and it was enriched by it. And once you were together with people like that, it was shared and it was appreciated and it was encouraged. It's a cultural thing within gay people, and it's appreciated by other gay people that have that some sense of it's a shared cultural thing. And without being together, people came together having the same ideas and the same humor. And once together, then they were able to share that. And having come from no similar backgrounds and having something in common, they really liked that, because for a lot of gay people, they had nothing in common a lot of times except for their sexuality.
How did you decide who your children were going to be, or your grandchildren?
Children was always based on bringing someone out, but grandchildren were often based on favoritism. And just as sisters were kind of based on a camaraderie that you had with a certain person because you were able to really get along or get on with that person. Grandchildren was kind of a favoritism kind of thing.
So what kind of social things were you expected to do if you were gay? Were there certain social obligations you had?
Oh yeah, you had to visit people, you had to call on people, you had to return calls, you had to go, and you had to put in appearances at parties, at social things. You were expected to, everybody that belonged to our family belonged to an organization that only members of our family were allowed to belong to, and it was called Our Ladies of Prague Guild, and they had meetings on Monday evenings, and they were always accompanied by tea and dessert serving with a little social meeting where there was always a charity work for the gay community done. And they went with everything from Save the Wall Foundation to sending clean sheets to Africa one year. They did everything. They raised money for the GAA and sent them a donation one year. They had a little bake sale one year.
Where did these take place?
They were little meetings that were done on Mondays in members of our family's homes. And that was a social thing that was kind of conveyed far back, and that went back clear back to 1973. And Mondays became an evening for, that was generally just an evening Victoria always spent with her own family. And so that was an institution that was just kind of propagated from that time period.
What kind of stories do people tell about you?
Oh, I hear everything.
Did you hear? You hear everything.
I have spies, see, and that's one reason for grandchildren. I always say grandchildren could be the eyes in the peacock's tail. Like Hera in Olympus, wherever Hera couldn't be, she had spies. So they could see and hear everything for her, and she could be everywhere at once. Well, their grandchildren will come back and repeat everything, blah, 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 and you just know what's going on. And then there are things that I just find out naturally, I guess, better than other people. We'd even go to parties and hear stories about ourselves so people wouldn't know who Victoria was. We'd sit there, listen to the whole thing, then introduce ourselves and leave. Or we'd talk about Victoria. We'd tell more stories about her and never say who we were and leave. I've heard all sorts of things, from I greased the brakes on my husband's car to killing him, to poison mushrooming my roommates, to I've been responsible for everything from crop failure to the wall being bad to just incredible things. Because by the time you get three people that talk about it, by the time you get to the fourth person, it's nothing like original state. And gay people, so eager for gossip and scandal, are usually willing to distort anything to an umph dimension, so that by the time it's finished, it looks like nothing it ever did to begin. And a lot of times we think that maybe that's why the reputation of Victoria really was it almost became a legend. It was started as I was a real smart person for publicity, and the things that we did were encourageable anyway. But then after that, by the time you had 200 queens all screaming about it, running around carrying it on, it became bigger and badder in life than it ever was. It was really a legend that outlived itself. Long after, really, I had stopped really becoming such a notable person that I did all these really crazy and insane things. They still had me going on and doing these things, and I wasn't doing anything anymore. But anything could be attributed to Victoria. I mean, if there was a political problem, if there was a scandal within another family, a breakup in a marriage, usually somehow some name sooner or later that was attributed to things that you'd hear about would be Victoria would be mentioned in the whole thing, whether I had anything to do with it or not. It sounded good, you know.
What was the deal with Lumps? What was that the place to go for breakfast then?
That was the place for go to breakfast, and there were a lot of real strange people that were into Lumps. It was an after bar crowd, and you know what that's like if you go to a restaurant. It had an after bar crowd of people. There were motorcyclists. There were kind of 60s dropouts from the political revolutions then. There were hippie type people. There were street people. There were people from University Mental Hospital that were out on leave. And that was the place that was open all night. People could go there. They wouldn't get kicked out. And they all kind of put up with themselves in a happy kind of ambiance since they dealt with each other because they had to. It was a mongrel existence where I put up with you because you put up with me sort of thing. And believe it or not, they all got along pretty well together, too.
Stories going on there that are good?
Oh, well, one year at Halloween time, there was quite an assortment of people arranged from anything from dominoes to alligators to drag queens. And a large crowd of gay people were eating there, and some straights came in and started a fight. Well, it was funny because the gay men began punching back, and the straight men were clawing with their fingernails and kicking. And they didn't realize how many gay people were in the room, and they kind of got nasty, and they looked over at me, and I was in my full regalia drag, and they said, "Who's the old lady running things with the black dress in the crowd?" Well, I stood up and I said, "Now, children, I think we should let them know how many of us are here." Well, nearly, 80% of the room stood up. And they realized that. Well, then they got kind of nervous about the whole thing. Well, then kind of a fight started. And one of my son-in-laws was a big bruiser. He is a bouncer at the Kismet at the time. Went over and picked up one of the straight boys and just kind of lifted him up and pushed him against the wall. And I said, "Now,